Hi everyone, my name's Aishi and welcome back to What It Takes to Be. Today we have Mr. Jared Judge with us. Mr. Judge has transitioned from being an elementary school music teacher to a music director in the greater Milwaukee area. Apart from being a music director, Mr. Judge is also the CEO and co-founder of BookLive, which is a live musician service that provides high quality live music for various events. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Mr. Judge, and taking the time out of your busy schedule to guide students who are exploring different careers. Could you please tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. So I do a lot of things as I run a company. It is, as you mentioned, it's a live music booking service. It also provides musicians with tools to help them run their business too, because you're young students right now, you'll learn that if you try to pursue some of your passions, the passion and the art is great, but the problem is that school doesn't teach you how to make a career out of that. So you have to learn yourself how to do that. And my company helps to bridge that gap too with musicians who quite frankly weren't taught how to run a music business. So on my day-to-day life, I do everything. So I am developing some of the software that our musicians use. I am doing customer service, working with hundreds of musicians, helping them plan out their gigs and manage their schedules. I'm working with different venues around town, building partnerships to encourage them to use our musicians for their next event and just to be a better partner to service what their wants and needs are. And then I also do all the admin work. So, it's tax season. You got to take care of your taxes. I had to do that. That was a big portion of the past couple of weeks too.
Okay. So you mentioned like you do a lot of things. So is that like what a typical day looks like for you?
There's almost no such thing as a typical day. When you're running a company, you have to do what the company needs at the time. I would say consistently every day, there are things that I spend my time on a like everyday basis. So that is marketing, getting the word out there about what you do. And then I also do software development on a day-to-day basis, plus communicating with my team members to enable them to do what they need to do.
And as I mentioned before, you were an elementary school music teacher before, and then you became a music director, and you worked on your with Book Live. So how is the transition from teaching like younger students to a different type of music career?
Um, it's there teaching people is the same. So when you're running a company, a lot of what you do is actually teaching. So I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to be an elementary music teacher because I got to learn the fundamentals of teaching people. Big part of teaching people is motivating. So, when you've got elementary students that don't necessarily want to sit still, learning how to motivate them by showing them like, hey, if you sit still for just 5 minutes, you're going to get to learn this incredible thing. You're going to make music on an instrument and it's going to be so much fun. That actually works all the way up to, somebody who's 98 years old. They need to be motivated to do something too. So motivation, and then having the frameworks of what you're teaching them. So being very clear about this is how you accomplish something.
Mhm.
That to me, like that's a big thing of what I learned in teaching elementary school at Monmouth Junction was how can I make this information as clear as possible so that my students are able to get the results of, how do I play a D on a flute? It's these fingers, and being very clear about how that works, making sure that they understand it and can do it. And again, that applies all the way up to the elderly. Teaching is just one of the skills that is super important, very undervalued, um, and has helped me transition from elementary students to running a company.
Mhm. And was it difficult, or were there any kind of challenges that you faced transitioning?
Well, running a company is hard. Starting your own company is really hard.
Mhm.
Um, 9 out of 10 startups fail within their first year. Ours has been going on since 2016, so we must be doing something right. But I would say the transition was hard because you're setting out on a journey that you don't know, you don't have a map for. So you have to figure out, you've got to whack bushes in the jungle to figure out a path of what do I need to do next. And in elementary teaching, your path is clear. Like the school district provides you a curriculum. You have to get through these assigned topics throughout the year. Your treasure map is given to you. So transitioning from having a treasure map to no map, figure it out for yourself. Yes, that was difficult, but really fun and enjoyable.
So what kind of education or training is required? Like, did you self-learn how to like make up BookLive, or like did you have like some ideas or like some inspiration for that?
Um, so that was a complicated question.
Sorry.
There, so the motivation and inspiration for me to do that was, I've been a lifelong musician, and the thing I went to music school twice, once for my music education degree, and then once for my master's degree after Monmouth Junction to be a music director. And in both of those degrees, they never taught me how to make a living as a musician. They taught me how to rely on other people to make a living. And I noticed that all the other musicians I'd worked with too never were taught the business of being a musician. And so that inspired me that I had to change that. I have to create something to make musicians better career people, better business people. So that was the inspiration part. And then the training part, I didn't go to business school for that. In fact, the whole reason why the company exists is because they don't teach musicians business. So I did have to learn all of that on my own. I did read a lot of books on it. Books are great, but you can only learn so much from books. You have to start trying stuff out yourself. I did go through a program here in town that's called a Startup Accelerator program. And it was like a 6-week course where you would get hands-on experience learning the basics of marketing and sales and some technology stuff, and then raising investment funding, which I did actually raise 100,000 in investment funding, which was awesome. But that also has its downsides too. So it's probably for another interview. We can talk about that later. So I got some training there, but truth be told, there's no all-in-one manual. There's no treasure map, as I said before, to do this. You have to piece together different pieces of education and experiences. And really the best way to learn is just by trying it and fail fast, fail often. And eventually you'll find enough things that don't work that you do find the thing that does work.
And what skills do you think helped you become like successful, like as a successful music director?
Problem solving. So critical thinking, the ability to identify the problems that you're experiencing right now. Like that's something that it's just self-awareness that's a challenge for many people, is like identifying exactly what am I struggling with right now? Because once you can identify it, then you can start to find a solution for it. And being able to rapidly identify the thousands of problems that music directing and running a startup needs, and then being able to come up with solutions for them, that's a learned skill. It's a practiced skill. And getting good at that really helps you move quickly and build something great.
And do you think a lot of people are joining your profession?
um, uh, so this would be easier to answer if it was like electrician or something like that.
Mm.
I do think a lot of Americans and a lot of people across the world are starting their own business,
Mhm.
particularly post COVID. Like in the middle of COVID, people had a lot of free time to explore their passions. And, my wife started a crafting business. I would consider us having the same job. Like she is the CEO of her own company.
Mhm.
I do think a lot of people are starting startups right now, and it's up to them how they want to build it and grow it.
Mhm. And
Do you want me to answer that about music directing?
yeah, you can answer it about like your book live or music directing too.
Well, so for music directing, I don't think as many people are getting into that as they used to,
Mhm.
especially with COVID. Like music directing requires live performance, and COVID crippled the entertainment industry.
Mhm.
Some symphony orchestras have been shutting down, and unfortunately, that means there's even fewer jobs available for them. But I do think people are still passionate about that. People are still going to music school to pursue that career path. Um, I'm just not sure what's happening now in 2021.
Okay. And so do you think like long-term job growth is increasing or decreasing?
For music direction, sadly, I think it's going to be decreasing.
Mhm.
Um, but running a company and starting a small business, I believe that's going to be increasing.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you have uh, a somewhat busy schedule and somewhat not busy schedule. So how's like the work-life balance?
Yeah, so that is a tough one. And it was a struggle for me and my wife too, because, work and work life balance is very important, especially when you are in a relationship with somebody else who you cohabitate with and share finances with and all that. And when I started my own business, and when I was in grad school too, grad school consumes your life. So you really have no work life balance. And then starting a business in the middle of grad school also compounded upon that. So I would be working extremely late into the night, pulling all nighters, that kind of thing. But eventually, as my wife and I were getting more serious, we discussed, what does an ideal work-life balance look like? And eventually we came up with some boundaries for each other to figure out, how do we structure our day?
Mhm.
As a startup founder, it's great because you are your own boss, which means you can create your own schedule. The challenge with that is, if you create a schedule where you're not working enough, then your startup is going to fail.
Mhm.
So you have to figure out, like, how do I put in massive effort and massive action and be really efficient with my time so that I can have work-life balance. And it's not perfect. It's still a work in progress for me,
Mhm.
but I really love being able to be in charge of that and be in control of my own destiny.
Okay. And lastly, what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a music director or wants to start, like begin a startup?
So I would say for both of those, the advice is just do it. Create opportunities for yourself. Don't worry what other people are going to think about you, because there are going to be haters. I have haters, and you just have to kind of get over that. You have to fail fast and find out, like, what works for you, and you can only do that by trying. So do small little experiments in your daily life. There are a couple books that I would recommend. One of those is called The Lean Startup, by Eric Ries. And you don't have to be running a business to, like, you don't even have to have the desire to become a small business owner to get value out of this book. This book is more about, like, how do you run small experiments here and there to discover whether or not your big idea eventually could work. But it's, how do you fail fast so that you can figure out, is this even worth pursuing? So I'd even say, like, if you're pursuing a traditional career path, try to get some opportunities for yourself in that career path without getting a full job in it. Like, do a small experiment, offer your neighbor to help with some sort of thing related to your career path, to figure out, is this something that I really like? And is it something that I'm good at? See if you want to pursue it long term.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here today, and I sincerely appreciate your time, Mr. Judge.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Aishi.
Of course.